My name is Sang, and I'm president of KSC. K-Start is the podcast where we're talking to investors, innovators, and founders, and we're having some insightful, sometimes funny, sometimes scary conversations about the startup scene and hope to garner some advice for the next generation of entrepreneurs. I'm really glad to be joined here by my friend and investor, Bernard from SparkLabs. Bernard, really glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Sang.
Bernard, for those that don't know you, I think there are very few people that don't know you in our audience, but for those that don't know you, can you give us a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a co-founder and partner at SparkLabs Group. We're a early stage venture capital firm. We focus on primarily seed and Series A. We've been around 11 years, and we've now invested in almost 600 startups across the globe, primarily focused on US and Asia.
Got it. SparkLabs does have some roots with Korea, so some connections, like deep connections with Korea. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's how we first launched, is our very first investment entity and also just accelerator was in South Korea.
Yeah.
So that was launched by my co-founder, Hanju Lee, Jimmy Kim, and myself. That was in December 2012. The first batch really launched in early 2013.
Yeah.
And from there we grew because we now we see ourselves as sort of half accelerator, half just traditional venture capital funds.
Yep.
And we've grown from various accelerator funds. And then we've launched a Series A fund in South Korea, launching a Series B fund. And we have some joint funds with companies such as SK Telecom, Shinhan Bank. And then so we continue to grow our presence in South Korea.
Yeah.
And then now also just globally as we expanded into Taiwan, Australia, more recently, Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
Yeah. Awesome. But your journey, I guess, into the venture world starts before SparkLabs. You were a founder yourself at some point.
Yep.
Can you talk about that journey a little bit?
Yeah. So the first two startups I co-founded were actually with my SparkLabs co-founder, Jimmy Kim. To sort of date myself, it was back in like 99.
Okay.
So it was our first company was a video on demand startup, which probably is, within like the mindset of today's generation.
Right.
But that's when it was really costly to even do what they call point cast systems or one-to-one.
Okay.
So we did a video on demand startup, then we did a voice portal even before mobile launched.
Wow.
Like voice commands.
Yeah.
Phone.
Okay.
And then, a couple more startups once I moved back to the US, had stints in finance at like a boutique investment bank. I was at a family office for 3 years.
Okay.
And then, launched SparkLabs basically in 2013.
So you did the startup thing, but then you went back to, I guess, more traditional financial services before you did SparkLabs. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like a direct path, but back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess what was the inflection point for you when you decided to open Accelerator with your previous co-founder? I guess the finance jobs weren't with your co-founder. That was just like a occupation or career path that you had, right?
Yeah. I think the inflection point was, it was just a nudge by my co-founder, Hanju Lee. So at that time, he was a few years into his own company, but he was more actively angel investing in South Korea.
Okay.
So when he was flying through San Francisco, he said, hey, let's catch up and have lunch.
Yeah.
And that's when he pitched me. He said, hey, I think it's a good time to start a Y Combinator South Korea.
Oh.
Right. So we sort of mulled on it. I said, oh, well, if we get Jimmy Kim involved, then we could do it together.
Yeah.
So that's how it sort of snowballed. There was this nudge or push by Hanju.
Right.
And then I think it was just the right timing and right people.
Yeah.
So we launched, and to be honest, like we didn't know how successful it would be.
Right.
But then the first year, I think we quickly got momentum, and then I became full-time a year later.
Okay.
And then it just, grew. We're now like 11 years in.
Yeah.
But it's funny because like a lot of the firms, let's say, that are established even in South Korea, they've been around 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
We talk to people in Korea, they think we've been around 20, 30 years.
Right.
Like we've only been around a decade.
Right.
We still see ourselves as sort of like the young gun.
Yeah.
On the block.
Okay. But you must have had like like the experience that you had as a founder, that kind of carries over, when you decide to start an accelerator, right? So do you, can you talk a little bit about that direct experience? You talked about what the business was. Like, can you talk about some of the wins, some of the hardships that you had as a founder that you may have carried over as like a lesson learned that you're also using, while you're growing SparkLabs?
Okay, let me try to. Okay, so a few things within that, and
Yeah.
directly answer your question. But one is, I think, I think we're biased because we're all founders.
Yeah.
So we felt like one, that was definitely a factor of our success so far, because you immediately have affinity with the people that you coach and mentor.
Yeah.
Which is the founders that we invest in.
Right.
So because we went through it, whether it's just failures like me or successes like my co-founder Hanju,
Okay.
we all contribute to the portfolio companies, to our founders that we've invested in.
Yeah.
And we felt like that has created a strong positioning for ourselves, but also just giving practical advice to those that we invest in.
Yeah.
And that has led to a factor of our success.
Yeah.
And also I would say, because we're all entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
When we launched SparkLabs, it was worth it than versus us if we just wanted to be in venture and joined an existing platform. I think that would have been not as satisfying. Challenge of building a new firm and implementing the same sort of founder mentality into our firm has led to our success so far.
Yeah.
So going back to your original question, in terms of my personal lesson in co-founding 4 startups, that definitely also affects how I look at founders and what I look for, and just my battle scars.
Right.
So that's all been an influence.
Did you always want to be a founder? Like, after university, a lot of time people have, some of our guests too, they don't really have a linear path to start up. Our previous guest was a lawyer and worked with you guys, and then he became an entrepreneur himself. And now he's starting a new company. But a lot of our audience, and I think particularly maybe like the Korean American community, right? Like generation, grow up, get a stable job, get something like that pays well, like 변호사, banker. Like, what about you? Like, did you always, dream of being an entrepreneur? Was there anything in your childhood that you think may have made an impact on your decision to do that?
Yeah, so I think it's a common sort of immigrant background and influence. That's a factor.
Sure.
Among Korean Americans and immigrant groups. I didn't have a dream to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right. It was just during my second year in graduate school.
Yeah.
So I was studying public policy. I was very much interested in government, and not politics per se, but more the policy side. And so this was during the first internet boom, 96, 98.
Yep.
And then during my second year in grad school, it just happened because my parents were entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. Some of my friends knew that I helped them launch some of their businesses, like, deep ops, but helping them write their business plan.
Right.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So 2 groups of friends asked me to join their startup.
Yeah.
One was an e-commerce and one was a video on demand company.
Yeah.
My friend Jimmy and his friend Peter started. So I helped out both during my second year in grad school. And that's when I really found out, just during that process, I really liked the chaotic process and concept on a napkin to launching a company.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think I sort of fell in love with the whole, the startup chaos.
Okay.
Right? And then that's how, after graduate school, I just went down this path where I just forgot about policy.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Just stayed in the whole startup world and tech scene.
Got it. I mean, that's, I think it's a conundrum for a lot of people, like that they want to do something like that. And then sometimes they feel like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Like, I don't enjoy the chaos. What do you think about that? Do you think there's actually like a certain type, you've invested in a lot of founders, you were a founder. Do you think there's a type of person for these things? Do you think it's learned?
I think it's a mix. I mean, sometimes it could be the person, but like I mentioned, because I saw my parents as they launched their small business, and some were very successful, some were not.
Yeah.
They're very transparent with me growing up, so I've seen both sides. And so when I launched into the whole startup world, I think I was very comfortable with the idea of failure.
Okay.
Which overall, it's not acceptable, I would say, in old schools. But, I think it's acceptable among the immigrant population of Korean Americans. And so that was definitely a comforting factor of going into the whole startup world.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a softer landing than I think like pure Korean culture where like failure was not accepted or there was a shame factor, right? I talked about this with another guest of ours, like it's shameful fail versus like, oh, just pick yourself up and do it again, which is kind of a different mentality that, you know, that people could have.
Yeah. And then, so I've seen it like, because, you know, I've seen my parents come from very sort of comfortable positions, and then they went into entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Like my wife, my mom, she was at med school in Ewha,
Okay.
right? And when she immigrated with my father to Chicago, she switched careers to become a CPA.
Wow.
And she was actually, I think she was like the first Asian American to get her CPA in Illinois.
Oh, wow.
Right? And then she became an accountant for a while.
Right.
And then her and my dad went into business together, doing different things like having like a luggage retail chain to beauty supplies.
Right.
And then finally they launched a coffee chain actually back in Korea. Rights for this Gloria Jean's coffee franchise.
Okay.
And they built it here up to 12 stores and they sold it.
Right.
So, but I've also seen other sort of failures that they've done.
Right. Do you think that, you know, you've come across a lot of founders both in Korea as well as globally, right? Do you think that there's differences cross culture on like what usually is that inflection point or why people decide to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, there's some sort of generalizations that you could sort of state, right? I would say overall, in Asia, right, one of the weaknesses, I would say, is that they're not as aggressive. The entrepreneurs are not as aggressive in asking and sort of staying on things.
Sure.
Versus, let's say, entrepreneurs in the US, right? So I call it like the double whammy in Asia.
You're an engineer and you're from Asia.
Right?
You're never going to ask for it.
Yeah. So it's things like in terms of like, if it's like some type of like BD role or just as a founder, you have to just be a little
aggressive. Sure.
And in our accelerator programs, it's hands-on where we match them with mentors.
Yeah.
Right. And they'll email like the mentor once.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we know he's too busy. He's so important. And I'm like, no, if they volunteered.
Yeah.
Can you
call him? Yeah.
It's like, heck, my partner, Jimmy, I have to email him to respond, right? Of course. And the same thing. I said, so this is my, like, one of my best friends, and he takes 5 times for me to respond. You have to be just as aggressive or more. Like, email him like 7 times.
Yeah.
Because he volunteered to help you out.
Right.
So keep him on it.
Yeah.
Right. If he explicitly says no, he or she, then that's a different story.
Right.
But people are busy. Like,
wait until they respond. Yeah.
Don't be shy about it.
Right. That's like the funny like catch-22, which is if they're that busy, you have to follow up with them because you're gonna miss it, right? Yeah, so you have to keep bringing it to the top of the inbox. Right? I think that gets lost in translation a lot in Korea too. Is like you have to follow up because they're busy. Like that's exactly why you follow up.
Exactly. And it's just like you find out even with our founders. Like on the flip side, like some people are like great at emails. Some people. They don't respond to emails for like a month. But then if I text them, they'll respond in like
right away.
Before, you know.
Yeah.
So I said, everyone's different. I feel like these are like basic things that people should know.
Yeah.
Human behavior. But I feel like we have to coach them on the same thing.
But do you think there's this is a random question, but is there like a generational gap too? I feel like people don't use email anymore.
That too. So the younger ones are used to like
text
but then some do respond to email better, even this younger generation.
Oh, okay. They're used to it, yeah.
What's the channel?
I see. To get to the conversation.
Yeah. So it's like you have to be a little more strategic, or people are like, oh, if he's busy, or they might even do it another way, like, oh, he doesn't want to even like talk to me, or they get offended.
Fear of rejection too, right? Okay. There's a bit of the fear of rejection. Like, I don't want to actually get rejected, so I'm not gonna ask, you know? And I think that's definitely like a common trait. But let's talk about the accelerator a little bit, right? So you guys have accelerators, you're a global presence. You've been expanding into the Middle East. You know, you're spending a lot of time out there as well. What are you seeing in the companies that you guys are focusing on right now? Like everywhere. Are there any common themes or threads that you guys are pulling on?
I think it depends on each market and the maturity of the ecosystem and the entrepreneurs.
Okay.
So the way that we look at markets is not by really the country, but it's by cities, right? Because each city is different, even in the US, in terms of culture, even in terms of talent base. So, from each city, we see different sort of strengths and weaknesses. But, since this is focused on Korea or Korean Americans, like Korea and Seoul, I would say, it just continues to grow and mature and is a very strong ecosystem.
Okay.
Right. In Asia, I would say it's top 3, if not even top 2 now.
Okay.
Right. In terms of the quality of entrepreneurs, the ideas.
Yeah.
You see this trend line that entrepreneurs are getting older here.
Yeah.
And even the ones that apply to our accelerator program.
Yeah.
Like the US, in the US, first-time entrepreneurs, average age is 40, 41.
Yeah.
Right. So even though all the consumer founders, they get all the press and they're in their mid-20s, still the average age, because a lot of them are like enterprise software, biotech, et cetera, they're like in their 40s and so they're willing to listen, not just to, us or our firm, or, if we're trying to convince someone, we just say, hey, just don't talk to us. Please talk to like 10 others.
Yeah.
And then you guys make the decision.
Oh, okay. And so, I think we're approaching like the later stage of our recording for this session, but, what is SparkLabs currently focused on in terms of like investment themes right now?
Well, we're still
AI. Yeah.
We're still generalists.
Yeah.
We say, as my co-founder famously promotes, anything online not illegal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
and that depends on jurisdiction too. The legality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But lately, like I guess we could be, like a lemming, where we have looked a lot at AI.
Yeah.
I mean, just because obviously, the market is there.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
There's a bit of FOMO.
Sure.
Right. So we look at AI, but we still look at consumer.
Yeah.
For everything.
Yeah. So AI is I want to touch on that a little bit, because on the panel we talked about it too, right? Like AI, and that was the theme. Everyone's talking about AI right now.
Yeah.
It's not really a new topic, but at least from the broader market perspective, it is a new hot topic. And have you since I guess the .com boom, I guess that was another time that a topic became this ubiquitous across the board. Do you feel the same way about AI? Which, is it a bubble?
Yeah, sure. I think some of that can be, right, and will be, but I think it's just more tangible from the prior wave of AI,
Okay.
which is around like 2015.
Yeah. The early versions. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Chatbots.
the funny thing is that our first AI investment during that period was a Korean company that wanted to do AI for enterprise, sort of like AI in a box for companies, but way too early. And even then, just the technology wasn't there. OpenAI launched ChatGPT,
language model
just like
exploded,
right?
Yeah.
Fastest user growth ever in history. And then it really just showed that, technology
is here now. Yeah.
Is here now. And that's what I think changed the landscape versus almost 8 years ago. And so now it's just a very different landscape where things are maturing. And then it's also obviously growth of NVIDIA and the chips. And it was just a combination of the whole sort of ecosystem.
Okay. Got it. So besides adding AI to the deck, for our founders, in all earnest, like that are early stage, right, that are looking for funding from a venture capitalist, right? How do you prepare? What do you do? Maybe it's too general. Maybe I'll make this a little.
I could, well, you could do AI tattoo on your face.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what you can read about in literature, or we tell our founders is one, you research in terms of the firm, but also specific partners, right, in terms of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Right. Some people like me, I'm like the worst person to approach because, I'm very broad. I show very little emotion when I meet them. I don't have set themes, but some partners, or even within our firm, they have sort of set themes or areas that they like. So that's, you have to try to find that right sort of target profile or pool of investors. And then it's just about timing, and also obviously just being aggressive, right? It is a sales funnel.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Our fundraising. Yeah. Right? Even our first, startup, the video on demand startup. Yeah. Just remember, it's just like, rejection. This is what getting a startup is.
This is what we're supposed to do. Get rejected.
Get rejected like 95 times out of 100. Rejected.
Yeah.
It's like same thing.
But I mean, like after having done it and being in the industry, obviously it feels so obvious, right? Like the hindsight of, yeah, you're going to get rejected like 9 times out of 10, but you're supposed to get rejected 9 times out of 10. You're supposed to get it right once, right? Like even if you think about just the regular sales funnel, not an investor funnel, right? Like 2 to 5% conversion is like pretty good. Like you're able to do that for enterprise sales. That's amazing. Right? And so I think a lot of founders get very discouraged. You know, oh, they don't like my idea. You know, they take it too personally. Yeah, they take it too personally. They rejected me as a person, you know. And that's a lot of the feedback that I get is like, it's not you. They could hate you too. But like maybe if there's nothing especially wrong with you, it might not be a good fit. Like, have you thought about that? You know, like I do think a lot of the times, you know, early stage founders will just like blanket a lot of investors, right? Because they just like go out, like I'm very early stage, et cetera. Every seed fund, right? Possible. But then, you know, statistically, 60 to 70% of that, they're not going to be good fits, you know? And so you're gonna get rejected from all those, or they're not going to respond. And then you have to like whittle that down. But like people often don't put in the work.
They have to put in the work, but it is a tough game, just to be frank. Because even, let's say, in Silicon Valley, sometimes there is investor bias, right? Some of them will be like, oh, you know, I only want like Stanford engineers. Or they might look at, he's a PM from Google. Oh, yeah.
That's good. Let's back it. Yeah,
that's like a PM from Google or Facebook or certain name brands.
Right.
So sometimes I think you have to know who your audience is,
how to position,
right? How to position it, or that, you know, maybe your product has to be so kick-ass, or you have to get that traction on your own or organically, right? Or notice,
right?
Because it is a competitive field. There's like thousands and thousands of startups out there, like targeting. Well, now there's so many seed investors, but there's still a limited number of Series A funds. Right. So at each stage, it just gets harder.
Right.
And so you have to do amazing things with that, like X amount of capital that you have. And that's something that I always tell our founders is, hey, there's good dilution, there's bad dilution.
Right.
It's sort of up to you.
Right.
You raise this like 2 million, you know, you guys have to execute well.
And
there's no one else to blame. And sometimes it is timing and other factors that are out of your control. And you have to accept that too.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many different variables that can go into it. Like you could get hit by the market, something bad could happen. You know, the industry could change completely around you, or something really, really bad could happen in the industry that changes investor perception. Like for crypto and blockchain, it was like the FTX thing, right? Like it's completely changes perception like very, very quickly, But then it also comes kind of back like eventually, but at least for a while, it's like, oh shit, like things are very bad, right? And so I do like that piece of feedback where you're being earnest that it's hard, right, to raise money.
It is. It's always hard.
It's always hard.
It's always hard. And so that's where sort of the resilience factor comes in.
Right.
And how it's a little bit of maturity. In terms of how you sort of take that rejection, right, or feedback. And you know, we've seen it even from our more mature founders to the seed stage, right? Everyone takes it differently. And sometimes you have to coach them in ways that you don't want to. Can you not react?
Can you not do that? Don't do that anymore. You'll be okay. Yeah. I get it. You know, there's just, you know, sometimes, I mean, this is a cultural thing too, but it's like, you know, different cultures have different ways of presenting, obviously, and Korean presentations are very different than, you know, American presentations in terms of how verbose they are or how much text there is in the deck, but they really, really want to talk about like certain topics. And I'm like, you only have 4 minutes, you know, and it's just like they're going on and on about either their resume or something. And like the coach is like, oh, you got to delete that and talk about what you actually do because you don't have any time, right?
Yeah. So I think that's something that we've, you know, tooting our own, that's something we've been very good at in terms of coaching across sort of all culture.
Right.
And anyone can look at our demo day vid or whatnot. I think our team is very good at coaching them in terms of getting the core sort of message across, right? Where it isn't any cultural limitation. It's just having a sort of set sort of idea or certain framework. right? And knowing how they should present themselves and what core messages they should get across.
Yeah.
So I think we've developed that over the past sort of decades.
Okay. Well, I think we're approaching the end of our session right now. On that vein, you guys are experts at coaching. Do you have any last words of advice for our founders in our audience?
Well, you have to frame it a little
I think in preparation of like a seed stage, early stage, I have an idea. Now I'm getting ready. I want to think that I'm ready to pitch an investor.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think are the pieces that need to be completed before you do that, before you go out and start pitching investors?
Well, assuming that, if you have access to obviously other sort of friendly investors, I would, definitely seek out their feedback.
Okay.
Right. And you want someone that's blunt or could provide good constructive criticism of your deck and your idea and your pitch. That's the main thing. Just keep on getting that feedback loop.
Yeah.
Like even in terms of building your company and
sure.
And being able to listen well.
Yeah.
Right. That's definitely not a common strength in a lot of people in general, but founders, being able to listen well.
Yeah.
Right. So
well, listen well, folks. I think, it's a weird theme, but it does come up a lot, like the coachability and the ability to take feedback and iterate on that.
Yeah.
I think that could be a superpower. Bernard, thank you so much for joining us here today on Case Start. We hope to have you again in the future. Thanks, everyone. Hit us up in the comments. If you have any questions from Bernard, leave them in the comments, and then we'll try to see if you can answer them. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you.